Hi, and thanks once again for joining me on the In Your Podkit video podcast. There are a lot of people listening now who will not know who Marina Alex is. Quite frankly, this doesn't surprise me, not because what she has accomplished isn't worth knowing, which in this instance is hardly the case. Rather, it's because the feats of females, no matter how significant in sport, have always historically taken a backseat to their male counterparts. As a golfer, I'm led to think of Tiger Woods before Annika Sorenstam, Wayne Gretzky before Haley Wickenheiser, and Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic before Serena Williams, just to name a few. I'm convinced that the most powerful moment in sport is when an athlete becomes humanized by their fans. Seeing them up close for the first time, maybe even being acknowledged by them. While social media has allowed athletes to engage fans away from their competitive environments, nothing compares to the intimate access that's given to patrons supporting women's athletics. Yet, interest in their sport continues to wane, and much to the dismay of those who have played the same sport, much like myself. As you listen to Marina, I encourage you to take in, much like a husband, father, brother, or adoring fan would, because this issue has plagued not just players on the LPGA Tour, but female athletes in general. She talks about the wedge that is only being driven deeper between the men's and the women's game on the professional level, yet yearning for equal recognition, the need for there to be more creative outlets for access and watching tournament coverage to coincide with modern entertainment, and in a manner that places them alongside their male peers. Marina gives a player's account of the state of the women's game, offering insight that very few get to actually hear. With that, I hope you enjoy my chat with LPGA star Marina Alex. Today is a big day. I have with me a former two-time SEC Player of the Year, Vanderbilt Commodore Hall of Fame member, LPGA Tour winner, Solheim Cup member, and a perennial top 50 ranked player in the world. Welcome to the In Your Podkit podcast, Marina Alex.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure for me to really have you on here and join me. I'm very glad you came on the pod with me today, not just because you're a big deal, but because I wanted to talk to you, I guess, somebody who has much more credibility than myself when it comes to this specific topic. Politics aside, we're talking about something that is, I think, so much bigger than us. And to me, it represents a glaring disconnect between business and sport, where I think there's some who are actively involved in bringing awareness to this, some who don't know, and others who really don't care at all to know about the division that exists between, I guess, the largest tours for golf. So please let everyone listening, I guess, know your thoughts on these two words that I think are commonly used when comparing the men's and the women's game, which is, yeah, but.
I know, that is so the truth. And sometimes I am a little vocal on Twitter. I feel like my Instagram is like a very nice, friendly place. And then my Twitter is a place to kind of get heated with people who I just feel like maybe need a little bit of an education on the women's game. And that's mainly what it is. It's nothing other than, I think there's some overarching assumptions about how women play the game. The difference mainly is in the distance. And I think a lot of people who watch men's golf and maybe don't watch as much women's golf focus solely on how far the men are hitting it, the scores that they're shooting relative to the length of the golf courses, and all of those things kind of create a bit of a divide between the two tours. So that's always an argument that I hear in terms of why we don't have better TV times or why we don't have purses that are higher, and we don't bring that entertainment value. And I just think that people are looking for a direct comparison. And much like the genders in themselves, men are different than women in a lot of different ways, and I think each have their own qualities. And I think if we just focus more on what each of them do it differently but well, you can kind of compare them side by side and respect them for what they each do. And I think that there's a lot that the women's game can offer any golfer at most levels, whether you're a starting out junior or whether you're just, kind of like a weekend warrior and you love to play, money matches with your friends. I mean, with the small exception of maybe, some former athletes that are now picking up the game, and I'm talking former athletes at a high level, no one's really hitting it at the distances that these guys on the PGA Tour are hitting it. I mean, that's what they do, and just like what we do day in, day out, they're training, fine tuning the technology, working out with their coaches, and we're doing all that too. And you see how far they hit the ball, but our game is actually a little bit more comparable to anyone else playing the game, and there's a lot to learn from what the women do when they're playing. The precision, the wedge control, the ability to hit hybrids and woods and hit it in the fairways and learn how to manage a golf course instead of necessarily overpowering a golf course. And I think that when fans can start to appreciate what that actually is and how that can help them, I think that will kind of change the dialogue on how we look at it, as opposed to a yeah, but, which is still, I think, probably about 50% of what we get, but it's changing. I would say in the last couple of years, there's been much more of an openness to watching women's golf on TV and actually holding it in a respectable equivalent to the men's game.
Yeah. And personally, I find it a little ridiculous that I personally need to explain to, I guess, like, quote unquote, the average golf fan, like, what the Solheim Cup is. Like, that should not be a
I know.
thing, yet
And
it is.
that is hard, and I think, I just hope that over time, with how we utilize social media, there's just, it's going to be in everyone's face a little bit more. It's hard to ignore something that is talked about all the time. And the more that we talk about it, I think the more people will be like, okay, you know what, I'm going to watch that. I'm going to see what it's about. And it's like, as soon as you watch it, I think that you will completely change how you feel about women's golf.
Oh, big time. If anybody needs to get fired up, just, watch your singles match with Suzanne Petterson there. That's enough.
Yeah.
I want to tackle this issue with you from maybe a little bit of a different angle than I think what's already been put out there. I think like the marketing efforts of lifestyle brands has kind of helped usher in a new kind of golfing audience. When I think of how the sport has really become transcended from, I guess, like the prim and proper khaki polo, like half-tied sweater over the back crowd, to now, people coming into the club with, hoodies and sneakers, grabbing road beers on the way to the first tee, and women like yourself who are really challenging the status quo. Taking a retroactive look at your playing career from, I guess, the time you left Vandy to now, how would you say that the consensus opinion has changed towards the women's game, if you think at all?
I definitely think it's changed, in the sense of we are being respected more. And, I even look at like the girls at Vandy right now. When I was there, we were wearing Oxford clothing, which is like unheard of. And it's mainly a men's brand. And then we would get some very rudimentary, like not well designed, shirts and khakis and skirts. And then I look, and there's a lot of money being put into the program, which I'm thrilled to see. From apparel, they wear Nike, they look athletic, they look good. They have, connections with PXG. They're getting equipment, which is a complete change from when I was there, 8-10 years ago. Even the facilities that they have access to, and like all of these things have come tenfold, which is great. And so to me, just looking at what I can see in front of me, to know that that's happening means that it's definitely happening more than just there. It's happening at the ground level, like in a lot of places. And I think that that is really important. Just to know that most of these companies are trying to put their resources into women's golf.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the facilities portion of it, because my first memories of seeing parity in, I think, the men's and women's game first happened in college, and
Mm.
I played for a mid-major where objectively there was a huge difference in the quality of the facilities available to each team. Like, we played at a course that hosted a tour event, whereas like the women played at a very nice course in its own right, but it paled in comparison. I say that with all due respect.
No, and that's fair.
Yeah.
And I actually think that the disparity, oddly enough, it has grown at the professional level, between the men and the women in terms of access to facilities and equipment and things that you would think would the gap would bridge. It's actually gotten wider at the professional level. I'm happy to see that at the collegiate and the amateur level, that the investment is there, but you're dealing with big organizations, universities that are putting up what the necessary funds are, where we are the LPGA are kind of responsible, for a lot of what we can invest in. And that's where you see a huge difference, because PGA Tour's resources are grossly, I mean, they're so much larger than what we can afford to do. And, that's a tough part in itself. But then I think we just are not seeing some of these manufacturers step up, and spend more time at events. We have some great ones, we have great representation from Ping and Callaway and PXG, in terms of golf clubs themselves. But then, we see a lack in access to equipment, on the road from TaylorMade and from Titleist. And yeah, we have our rep who comes out with golf balls, but we don't have access to Titleist equipment week in and week out. So that's kind of like, if you're counting those as, I guess, would be like your big five, we have 3 out of the 5 every week. And we deal with one trailer that is shared amongst all of those reps and, the club builder of our tour. And it's just, you go to a men's event and there's probably 6 or 7 trailers, so that's where I would love to see things change for us, and just prioritizing some of that for these companies to see the value in investing in the women's game. I mean, the market is there in the sense of, if you want women to pick up golf and watch golf, I think that you need to put in a little bit of the money to make us have a little bit more of a presence. And that will maybe, I want to say, hope get another demographic of people picking up the game, because that's important, is to keep your amateurs and all of that, reinvesting in the game of golf.
Yeah. You alluded to, I guess, the bridge between the two tours, and I want to kind of maybe focus a little bit on at the tournament level here. I'm sure you know enough PGA guys to answer this. So can you bring the listeners inside the ropes with you for one full week at any tournament? It doesn't have to be this week.
Okay.
And this is no shot at any kind of tournament or organizers, right? But can you give us an idea as to what might differentiate an LPGA event from that of a PGA event?
In what regard? Like, actually, the amenities, like, once we're there, are usually pretty good. We actually treat our staff, I think, a bit better than what the PGA Tour does. Our caddies and our player guests. So if we have like a registered trainer or a registered, like a family member or something like that, in a non-COVID year.
Yeah.
Obviously things are different now because we're trying to limit contact with everyone. But, before 2020, it's most of the time we could bring 2 and sometimes 3 people into player hospitality with us. So that means they get access to like all the food and everything that we get, which is nothing like the PGA Tour. They have their player dining, and that's just for the players only. And then the caddies and the trainers and anyone else is kind of just, they, have to do their own thing. There is stuff provided for them, but I know from just chit chats that the caddy experience in that regard is better for them on the LPGA than the PGA Tour. I mean, and the trade-off is you're playing for much bigger purses on the PGA Tour. So, your salary and your income is a lot higher. But I actually do think that the tournament organizers themselves do a great job with the budget that they have, in terms of making us feel like we are at a professional event. it mainly comes down to television and purses, and the purses come from the television, really. But they treat us like we are the utmost professionals. It's just being able to have the ability to do a little bit more, and that just comes from having more money.
Okay, so on that and what you've
Mm-hmm.
alluded to before, for a lot of reasons, I think that the general public is missing out on a product that's not only truly premium, but one that the average player can benefit from seeing more regularly. I mean, we're coming off of a week where Lydia Ko just broke a tournament scoring record, like posting
Yep.
28 under. What path do you think that the LPGA needs to pursue in order to get their product in front of more people in a way that's more accessible than it is now?
I think it's just a level of creativity, and I don't know exactly where things stand in terms of contract cycles with things like Golf Channel and all of that, and in the sense of what we can and cannot do from that regard. But I think, more streaming, more ability to access it easily on, Hulu has live sports, Amazon's starting to have live sports. Getting us on a medium like that, where we're in the eyes of a few more people, where they might be scrolling and be like, oh, let me watch that. Not everyone is tuning into cable television anymore. I know a lot of people don't even buy cable. They buy, like, YouTube TV or something like that. And so I think we have to be a bit creative in the sense, and if it's allowable, like in our contracts, to kind of, give our coverage and our rights to some of these other platforms, so that we can be streaming in different ways and people can access it maybe even at a time that they want to. It doesn't even need to be like, yes, live is great, but what if you were like, I'm going to watch a show, and you flip on Prime or Netflix or Hulu and Prime specifically, because they're already doing sports, and that can come up on the ticker like, hey, do you want to watch like round 3 of the Lotte Championship? And you can click on it and see what started from the beginning, fast forward it if you want, I don't know, whatever. Looking for something specific. I think just having a little bit more of an ability to watch sports the way you could watch everything else is, kind of, to me, seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so on that, I want to go back to 2011, where Mike Wan,
Mm-hmm.
who's I guess, a fellow Macker like myself and current CEO of the LPGA Tour,
Yeah.
he gave a talk at our conference championships, so made me think, or I guess realize first and foremost, that the two tours were partners and not a single entity, which might be surprising for a lot of people. Um, but he also made me think differently about the business side of sport, leaving me feeling, I think, very optimistic about the future prospects of your tour. And now that I find myself maybe 10 years, I think 10 years, yeah, removed from that talk, like, in his departure for the USGA is imminent.
Mm-hmm.
What might you expect of the next person who succeeds him, as well as what his new position with the USGA might mean for the women's game?
That's like a very loaded question. I think Mike has set up
Right?
like a really good foundation. He's
Yeah.
made some really incredible partnerships with companies that are both, title sponsors, but also corporate partners for us. And that is a great, like, that took a lot of time, took a lot of energy, took years and years of, successfully running events and drawing crowds, bringing in, enough TV ratings, all of that, to kind of keep these sponsors coming back. So, like, that is in itself, a huge accomplishment that he has achieved for us, and kind of set and left in a very good place in that foundation. And I think with whoever is coming in, and we don't really know what direction that's going yet, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. I think the next step is going to be the more like the outward pressure. I think that a lot of businesses and sports are feeling, in the sense of like trying to bridge that equality pay gap. And I think that is going to be, the tough part for the commissioner coming in, and, figuring out whatever that is from a creative standpoint to get us in the eyes of more people, so that we are worth a bit more, so that we can play for a bit more, and that our TV times, we have to fight for a little bit more primetime slots so that we're seen at certain hours. But then again, if you are a little bit more creative and where you can stream and how you can stream, then that also could, increase the amount of people tuning in as well. And that's the tough part. Now, in terms of him and what his role would be at the USGA and what that means for, it's a completely different perspective. USGA is always kind of, I feel like, had I guess it's like a stuffy kind of vibe where, everyone feels like they don't understand, what it is to run a championship event, in the regard of they don't play the courses themselves, right? They do, yeah. Players sometimes complain about crazy setups and this and that, and it's an amateur run organization, but yet you're holding professional championships. And so I think that his 10 plus years at the LPGA running professional events and understanding how that works is only going to help them moving forward in running the US Open and the women's US Open. So that in itself will be good. And, who knows what he is going to try and bring to that in terms of increased corporate marketing and corporate sponsorship. He's been really successful at creating those relationships for us in the past. So I can't imagine he won't excel, continuing to do some sort of role, in that regard for the USGA, and just hopefully bringing in, more dollars to be spread around all of the championships.
On that note, I remember reading an article that was put out maybe a couple of years ago that I guess took a survey of all the junior players playing competitive golf in, I think it was North America, where it said only about 30 some odd percent were actually female. So in your opinion, what will have to change in the women's game, perhaps at a grassroots, oh my gosh, what will have to change at a grassroots level? Yeah. Over the next however many years, in order to make it even more exciting sport that attracts more talented, marketable young women, not unlike yourself.
I think it's happening. I can see it just from what I see out on tour as a player and just the talent that comes in, at such a young age. So it's happening. Like, there's no way that you have a Brooke Henderson's, Lydia Ko's, Nelly Corda's, the Gentanagarn sisters, all of these players, coming in at, Lydia, like at a beyond a young age, but and Lexi, 16, 17, 18 years old, like really dominating. So it's happening. And actually, in our most recent discussions of this, like amongst players, the junior level girl demographic is actually growing at a rapid rate, like at a rate that's higher than the boys. So it is becoming more enticing for them. Whether they're watching the PGA Tour or the LPGA Tour, like at that level, like doesn't matter to me, because it's at least getting them into the game and keeping juniors interested and keeping golf in their hands, whether that is like they go to college or it's just a lifelong sport for them, or they become a professional. Like, as long as it's like keeping golf in the picture, I think it's a success, and I do think that it is happening. It's just maybe hard to see, unless you look at the statistics of it, but it is for sure happening that junior girls are picking up more golf clubs.
Okay. I caddied for one of our mutual friends, shout out Nicole Vandermeid. And let me tell you, like, my body really appreciated her bringing out the tour bag for the week, just saying. I've always been a real big fan of her game, and I thought that she would be, or I guess she might develop into a real nice player out there. But I guess unfortunately life doesn't happen that way. Like, it doesn't always work out the way we want it to. So having enjoyed the success that you have in your career to this point, like, I'm interested to know, like, how you approach striking a balance between rewarding yourself and then being maybe fiscally responsible so you can continue living a life that's exciting to you whenever that time comes.
Yeah, I think, I've always been, you just don't know when your last day is going to be. And it's very much the truth. Like, I've actually had a pretty serious back injury the last, I've been battling the last 6 or 7 months. It took me out of playing, from September of 2020 until March, where I couldn't compete at all. And that, and I honestly didn't know when I would be back. I didn't know at what level of health I would have been back. And I'm still kind of battling with that. So, you just don't know in athletics when, the end of the road is going to happen, because it does happen for everyone. So I think that for me, and with the fact that we're not out there, playing for $1-2 million checks every week, where, you win a tournament on the PGA Tour. I mean, that is truly life-changing in a lot of ways. So I would say a lot of the LPGA players are very much like financially responsible human beings, because yes, you can make an incredible living, and you can set yourself up to save and, maybe transition into a different career path. For a majority of us, this is not going to be the only thing we'll ever do. Some people maybe so they've done so well for themselves that, golf is like their only occupation. But for the rest of us, that's probably not going to be the case. So it teaches you a lot of good things, a lot of good skills. But it also does teach you the perspective of, you're not going to live this way forever. Right. You're just not. So it teaches you to be responsible, but also appreciative of what you can do now. And that's important, to just, one day you may wake up and like if something happens physically and golf's never the same again, that unfortunately means could be the end of your job. And so you have to just treat it as, I got to take advantage of what I can when it's in front of me.
Okay. Now, as we wind down, as of right now, the fellows are playing, a team event in New Orleans. I've been big on having, I guess, a co-sanctioned or at least a co-ed event to make golf more exciting for the viewers, much like myself. I'd have to imagine that this is something that you might be appealing to someone like you.
Oh yeah, I think all of us are. I actually think the men's players are too. I think it would be a really awesome concept. It's just more like getting the two tours together to like logistically figure it out, and it would be in our best interest, obviously. I think it would be in their best interest, but I mean, who knows? It's hard to say how they run their business operation, but I think that there'll be enough pressure to kind of put that together.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, considering I have such a big audience here in the pod.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious to know, who would you want to play with, since I think, unfortunately for me, I'll be working, so sorry.
I mean, if it was like a PGA Tour and LPGA player, I have like one of my really good friends who's kind of bounced between PGA, Korn Ferry. He actually played a fair portion of his early professional career on the Canadian Tour. His name is Andre Gonzalez, and he is like one of my best guy friends who plays men's golf. Anyway, he would definitely be my go-to partner. I think we would have a ton of fun.
Beauty. Okay, so I see that you're wearing a pretty sweet LPGA hoodie. I know that we were just talking about it a little bit before we hopped on here, but LPGA launched a new campaign, and it was actually, I think, one thing that one of the NBA guys was wearing on his hoodie. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called the #hoodie for golf, but the whole concept of this hoodie is to raise money for the Renee Powell Foundation. And I believe it is the Clearwater Foundation as well. So Renee Powell was one of our founding members on the LPGA Tour, first African-American woman to compete on the LPGA. And she has a foundation set up, and that is to basically help, minorities, African-American girls get into golf. Golf has this stigma of being very exclusive. And I think that is something that we're definitely trying to change, culturally speaking, across the game. And so it's kind of a win-win, in the sense of this hoodie is out, sold on the LPGA Pro Shop websites as lpgaproshop.com. All the proceeds for this hoodie are going to her two foundations. And the other amazing thing about Renee is her dad was actually the first African American golf course designer and builder in the States. So, they are maybe not talked about enough in the golf world in the sense of what they have accomplished, what they've done, trailblazers. And this is a way for us as an organization to kind of give back, but also at that grassroots ground level, get more people into golf that I think we desperately need, a more well-rounded representation of people out here playing. And it's just important to continue to push for that. It's funny, I've gotten a couple of people ask me and they're like, oh man, it's $75. And I'm like, okay, yes. But if you actually read what it's going towards, with the exception of whatever the cost is to make this, the rest of it is going towards these two foundations. And that's important. The importance is to raise the money. It's not about what the cost of the hoodie is, or even that, yes, it's good for, I think, our tour to also get a little bit of it's just kind of like getting the awareness out there, like, oh, LPGA, you just kind of put something in front of someone's face and they may not necessarily consciously, put A and B together, but they're just giving them a sense of like, this tour exists, these women play golf, but also, this hoodie is going towards something that is really trying to make a difference. And, you just got to try to get those baby steps to change what the face of golf is. And I think it needs to have a little bit more of a welcoming face, and it even goes to what we talked about a bit briefly about, what we're wearing to play golf and how that's changed over the course of 10 years. There's so many things in golf to me that seem like it pushes people away because it's a little intimidating. And I think that when we can relax that culture, it doesn't mean we need to lose respect for the game by any means, but I just think relaxing the vibe and the culture of it will just allow anyone to want to play it. When it is not so much what seems like a challenge to pick up a golf club and go to whether it's a driving range or a course and play, then you will get more people into it. And then I think that's what we're trying to like change over.
Yeah, the more I'm talking to you right here, Marina, the more I'm kind of realizing that golf is much more than a game, right?
It is. It can be more than a game. And it's like most sports, yes, it's entertainment value, but it also is a platform to do other things. And it's like, you have to kind of meld the two and just, yes, provide the entertainment, but also when it calls for it, to like use that platform to try and do something better. And that's what we're trying to do.
So just before we hop off here, I'd say, I want to put you on the hot seat, but you've been on the hot seat for about 40 minutes now. So do you have any parting words for the listeners, until at least I have you back on here to pick your brain a little bit more?
I think that, if you are a golf fan or if you're not a golf fan, there, maybe you'll become one after listening, but I think that, just to maybe, give a little tune into what women's sports in general are doing. It's not even just golf, but, and I'm sure in Canada, women's hockey is a huge deal, but probably doesn't get as much of the notoriety that the men's league does. And, soccer, basketball, like all of these sports need constant support. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like I can talk about the LPGA all day long, but I also need to do the other sports the same justice that I'm doing my own. And that is talking about them and getting people, focusing on them, because, hey, you may not be a golf fan, but you may be a basketball fan, or you may be a soccer fan. And you know what, if you are, you should probably be trying to tune into both men's and women's game. And that's, I think, probably the biggest thing I could pull from all of this.
Yeah, there's a nice saying that I've heard quite recently. It's, vote with your feet, when, maybe you can't do it so much these days, but maybe with your fingers and choosing where you, tune into. But
yeah,
I like it. I like it. Thank you so much for being on here, Marina. I
Thanks,
really can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Have a good one.
You too. I hope you now have a better understanding of the tilted tables that the women in sport, today being golf, face on a daily basis, at least as much as one can in a 30-minute interview. This chat was particularly appealing to me, mostly because of how impressive an interview Marina actually is, as well as how she approaches advocating for her sport in an equal tone as she does for others, which is something that I feel is missed when this topic comes to the surface. On a different note, I would love to see not only a co sanctioned event for the sake of shining a spotlight on the product that the LPGA circuit offers and giving more people a sense of what they've been missing out on. Also, if you haven't heard of Andreas Gonzalez, it might be worth your time in checking him out. With a mustache like that, I can only imagine how he would be worth a follow. Until next time, thanks again for joining me in talking about the things that matter.